You might have seen his books. In case his name sounds familiar, that's probably why that, and a few newspaper stories. He's the author of Born Divine, a fascinating comparative study of nativity myths and such, and then The Apocalyptic Jesus, a debate. That brings up a question I'm going to quiz him on later. And then a really fascinating book called The Jesus Seminar and Its Critics. And Bob's edited a book called The Complete Gospels in 92 and revised in 94, which contains new translations of just about every scrap of a gospel that has been discovered. The four familiar ones and everything else you've never even heard of, and endlessly interesting. And so let me, after that long-windedness, welcome you onto the show, Bob.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
How long have you, well, you started in 86, back in the seminar. How did you come to be involved with it?
Well, it had begun just in 85, so I just heard about it from a friend, and he said, this thing sounds really unusual and interesting. Why don't we go check it out? So I didn't really have any strong scholarly commitment to studying the historical Jesus, but I thought it would be, something worthwhile to investigate. And I came to my first meeting, and I was just amazed that so many scholars could tackle such a serious problem and do so in a way that was collaborative. I mean, of course, there was a lot of vigorous debate, but it was not the sort of staid, kind of more, shall we say, standoffish thing that I was used to from professional meetings. This was a real meeting of the minds, even if there was a lot of, like I said, a lot of disagreement. And it was a way in which people had committed to a project in which the group work seemed to be more important than individual egos. And in scholarship, that's quite rare. So I was hooked a lot by the ethos of the work as much as by the topic of it.
Yeah, I echo that. I have to say, having been to Society of Biblical Literature meetings where, needless to say, a lot of great work is done, and having been to the Jesus Seminar many more times, the difference is immediate and palpable. You don't get the impression that so many of the people, as at other professional society conferences, are there to pad their resumes and to try to get a raise. None of which is blameworthy, but somehow the motivation is, and the feeling is completely different, as you say, with the camaraderie, and it's a unique thing I hope can be emulated, though it's harder to imagine that being done on a bigger scale, but who knows?
Yeah, one of the things that many people may not know is that at your typical academic meeting, what happens is that someone will come and maybe have half an hour, and that person then will essentially read a paper for like 25 minutes and then take a few questions, and then it's on to the next topic. Whereas at the seminar, all the papers are distributed many weeks ahead of time, and people come having read everything, and so no one actually reads a paper. We spend the whole time in give and take and conversation and sometimes, real knockdown debate. And at the end of that, what's quite unique about the seminar is that there's a process of voting in which the fellows then have to answer on their ballots, how they stand or fall on various propositions which were offered in each paper. So it gives people who present papers immediate feedback, which is sometimes very gratifying and sometimes quite chastening. And so it is a place where your ego really tends to rub down a bit because you have to take seriously the fact that your peers are rendering their verdict on your work.
Yeah, I only nearly got into a fist fight once there. It's been very very positive, and now I've patched up things with that guy. What would you say is this seems obvious, but I don't think it is. What would you say is the goal of the Jesus Seminar?
Well, the seminar really has two, shall we say, basic formal goals, and one is to pursue topics of vital concern to scholars in Christian origins, and to do that in collaborative ways. in ways that harness people's energies and work together in terms of group work on a long-term project. So instead of people pursuing projects as lone scholars, off in their study, that the work is all through the process being worked out in dialogue with others. So it's that unique collaborative venue which is very important. And secondly, and this makes the seminar, I think, unique among any other academic organizations, it has an explicit mission to public education, in that our work is always done with a view towards informing the public about it, without pulling any punches as to our presuppositions or our results, and trying to make the work of biblical scholars accessible to people, not by talking down to them, but by trying to speak in language that everyone can understand.
I noticed that there was an awful lot, for years in Time, Newsweek, anybody else that took notice, they would say, look at this bunch of nuts. They're publicity hounds, and they have crazy ideas that no one else agrees with. When I knew from the first discussion I heard there that all of this was, though innovative, was well within the mainstream. It was not eccentric in any way, but it sounded that way to people who had never heard of what was, had been going on for a couple of centuries in biblical scholarship. And to say that the seminar was just a bunch of publicity grabbers was just a pejorative way of saying what you just did accurately, that they wanted people to get a whiff of this finally. And you could tell a lot of folks were very upset. They didn't want this coming out. You mean, this is what biblical scholars really think, and it is. They just don't like to say so.
Yeah, it's amazing from our perspective as scholars is that what sometimes the public found most shocking were things that scholars have routinely just assumed for about 200 years. And the shock value didn't come from the work itself. It came from the fact that this stuff has been kept under wraps, that scholars have had really no interest in talking to the public, and in most cases have just not been willing to, because they were afraid to come up against the kind of fundamentalism which seems to be taken for granted in our culture. I mean, until the Jesus Seminar came on the scene, whenever the media wanted to get an expert's advice on the Bible, they turned to someone like Jerry Falwell or somebody like that, and the seminar changed that. Seminar was really the first time that this public airing of scholarship went out through the mass media. And so we had a series of articles in Time and Newsweek, even on some TV documentaries about that. And what it did was expose Americans who wanted to learn about it to what critical biblical scholars had been doing for quite some time. And you're right, Bob, it put a lot of our peers on the hot seat, because then they had to answer the question, well, why haven't you been telling us about these things?
I've had students in rural North Carolina community colleges, adult students, hear just some basic stuff about the older New Testament, and they'd say, why did I never hear of this? I thought I would never understand this till I got to heaven, and they had the big seminar up there on unanswered questions. I said, no, we got a lot of those answers, but you might not want to hear them, or somebody might not want you to hear them. But you always have both reactions. This is heresy, or thank God, I can understand this now. And it's just amazing the reactions you get from Bible fans on both sides.
It is quite, I want to affirm that. That's my experience, too, both as a college teacher and as someone who speaks a lot in public, is that many people are quite threatened by it. But many people who have a kind of affection for the Bible and the Christian tradition but can't take it literally haven't, until they come across this kind of exposure to our work, they don't know how to take the Bible at all. So they just ignore it. And what this work in the seminar does, and it's not just the seminar, but scholars like us, is open up a way by which people can fully engage as critical thinkers and still take the Bible seriously, though not literally, and understand it as one of the pillars of our Western culture.
I found in my work with the free thought community that there is nothing that will garner immediate galvanized interest as much as questions about the Bible. All these atheists and agnostics, oh man, more Bible. They want to hear about this. They've always kind of heard it's all true or it's all bunk, but to actually get into the unraveling the thing, they seem to be fascinated by it.
Well, that's fascinating, yeah.
Do you think the direction of the Jesus seminars changed since Bob Funk's untimely passing? In case people don't know, Robert W. Funk was one of the founders and really the leading light of the seminar from the beginning, and he passed away a few years ago, and it's been carrying on pretty vigorously. But has there been any change of direction since then?
No, the change of direction, as much as we lament Bob's passing, the work of the seminar has continued more or less in continuity with what was before. The major change in the work of the seminar came after we actually finished the work on the historical Jesus. I mean, we began that project in '85, and it took us 12 years, actually, of meeting twice a year and all the time in between. It took us 12 years to work through all the Gospels, verse by verse, and do our analyses and our voting, and then give judgments as to the historical value of each and every verse in those Gospels. After that, then, it's fascinating because we really didn't quite know what to do. I mean, once you have, so to speak, done Jesus, where do you go from there, right? We've had projects going on the historical Paul, which actually, I think in terms of upsetting the Orthodox apple cart, would probably be more explosive, actually, than our findings on Jesus. We've had a seminar on the Acts of the Apostles, which is, the New Testament book purporting to tell the history of the early church, but historically turns out to be 99% fictitious. And we've had a seminar on Christian origins, trying to understand how we got historically from Jesus to Christianity. But that work has been more diffuse and less, of course, less able to gather sort of media attention or the public's interest because it's not so, shall we say, laser focused on something as attention-getting as Jesus himself.
I remember being in one of these latter-day sessions where the topics all had to do with the economics of ancient Galilee. I have to admit I had trouble staying awake for that one. You're not going to get any protesters outside on that.
Yeah, but yet you can see why scholars would take that seriously because the message of Jesus about the kingdom of God is largely having to do with, how human beings should live on this earth in a way that allocates resources so that poor people, so that every human being gets treated with the dignity of a child of God. And of course, Jesus' message, for it to be real, has to be understood against the real life facts of his time and place. And so the economics of Galilee is actually very important to getting a handle on the sort of real time effects of the message of Jesus. But as you say, that's a very hard thing to explain in a soundbite, to a reporter.
You've written these various books. So which is your own favorite of your books, and what is the present focus of your own scholarly research?
Well, the book that I wrote called Born Divine was just a real adventure for me to write, and because, as you pointed out earlier, the heart of it is a comparative study between the stories about the birth of Jesus and the stories of other people in the ancient world who were known to be, or who were believed to be, sons of God because they had a God for a father and a human for a mother. And I just thought, what can we learn about the early Christian mentality by putting those stories in that context? And it was just so interesting for me to get into the nitty-gritty of that. As well as in that book, what I did also was follow out the string of what we call infancy